Taku manoa, taku hingi ngā rohi mai ki a hoi tēnei wā, kia tika o ka kupu, kia tika o ka whakaaro, kia pono te katoa ko mahi e tēnei wā. I ngā wā ka hiki mai hui e, haumi e, taiki e.
Taiki e.
Kia ora koutou katoa. No mai, haere mai, and welcome to everyone who is joining us in whatever place and time you are doing that from. You're warmly invited to our kōrero, and we hope you find something meaningful in this space with us. To introduce myself, ko Susan toku ingoa. I'm Susan Wardell. I'm an academic in the area of social anthropology at the University of Otago, and also a writer of essays, poetry, flash fiction. I am tangata tiriti, and I whakapapa to Ireland, Scotland, England, and Germany. And I had the privilege of growing up in Ōtepoti, Dunedin. And I'm really honoured to welcome here with me Iona Winter, Nadine and Hura, Hendrix, Hennessy-Ropiha, and they will introduce themselves in a moment as well. The context of my leading this kōrero today is that I am the director of the Otago's new Centre for Medical Humanities, which is sponsoring this issue of Flash Frontier themed around he mutunga endings. So I'm honoured to be a guest editor for this issue. And it's a particular type of ending that we're wanting to create space to speak to today, which is around the topic of suicide and thinking about the responsibilities and impacts and limits and possibilities for creative work in a number of different genres on this topic, and some of the very specific national contexts of Aotearoa New Zealand as well, while recognising in these layers of the national and the political that it remains just searingly personal. So thank you especially to each of our panelists today for generously bringing yourself and your work and your experiences into this space. And I'll allow you to introduce yourselves now.
O kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, koutou e noho e whakarongo ana, tēnā koutou. He mihi anō hoki ki te kai karakia, e te tuhine, tēnā koe, te kai whakahaere o te kaupapa, ai tēnā koe, taku tunane, tēnā koe. Ko Nadine Hura ahau. Nadine Hura is my name. No Ngāti Hine ngō Ngāpuhi o Kutupuna. On my dad's side, I'm from the far north, from the iwis in the far north. On my mum's side, he Pākehā hau, no Ingarani of the north of England. And I live and work and have raised my children, who are all now adults, in Te Whanganui Atara. And I'm beaming in from the crib of Papa Hone Tūwhare e mihi ana ki tō tātou nei whakapapa, the creative whakapapa, mihi to all that links us here today for this kōrero, which I'm really looking forward to. I forgot to mention I'm the pōtiki of my whānau, two older brothers through my mum, and then multiple siblings on my other side as well. So I come from a big whānau, and yeah, it's really beautiful to be here today. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Ko Iona Winter tohu kuikoa no Moeraki. It's difficult to know what else to say. It feels deeply moving to be here. I'm Iona Winter. Carrying multiple strands it feels today, including my tama Reuben Winter, who has been the catalyst for my work in the area of grief and suicide bereavement. So yeah, I whakapapa to Moeraki in Karitani, north of Ōtepoti. I currently live in Courtsopolis, also known as Reefton, on the west coast. And Rue, my tama, his whakapapa was Pawaringa, so far north. Yeah, so I feel like I carry I don't know, multiple threads, yeah, and connections. And I'm really looking forward to the kōrero and grateful that the space has been made for us to do so. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Hendrix. I'm from Levin and living in Wellington now. Whānau whakapapa to Ngāti Kere, Ngāti Tauranga and Ngāti Rākau. Yeah, I'm really grateful to be here to share this kōrero with you all, and yeah, excited to hear what you have to say. And thanks, Susan, for putting it together.
Thank you all so much. And for everyone listening, please feel free to have a look at the bios that each of our panelists have provided as well, and the incredible corpus of work they already have of publications, books, exhibitions, in which their wisdom on this is already being held and shared. So you'll find that just in the info section below the video. So obviously there's so many layers of this very big, beyond words, difficult topic of suicide and suicide bereavement, and many questions we could ask. But I thought I would start with asking you about how and why this topic came to be in your creative work. What was it? Why did you want or maybe need to address the topic of suicide in your creative work? And whoever would like to respond first, you can speak to how that came to be for you.
For me, it started probably a decade ago when sons of friends took their lives, and then friends of my son took their lives. So I started writing poetry about that, about the grief, and wanting to put words to this wordless, really, experience. Perhaps for myself, as well as articulating something that other people couldn't find words for. Yeah, and then my nephew took his life, and then my niece took her life, and then my boy took his life, all within 2 years. So it's been very present. And prior to that, I worked in mental health for 25 years. So it's something I think that's always been there, that I've always been conscious of, that I've walked alongside. I walked alongside Ruben for half his life with suicidal ideation. So I think it was something I felt compelled to not shy away from. And my whānau will attest to the fact that I can't shut my mouth. And the voice of things that are difficult and uncomfortable. So yeah, I've just continued that. After Ruben died, I thought he's my only child. I've got nothing else to lose. So I've done that. Yeah, it's felt really important, but also to make space for other people's grief. Yeah, I've heard so many other stories as I've shared mine. Yeah, so I'll stop now. Other people talk, but that's what's brought me to this space.
Kia ora, Iona. I also, you just ended there on thinking about others, and just want to acknowledge those who might be listening for whom, and I think all of us probably, because it is an issue that if you are not touched by in this country, you would be very lucky. And I know that in particular young people today are experiencing the shock of this type of grief way more. It seems to be way more prevalent than it was when I was a young person. So with that in mind, yeah, just mihi to everyone and all of those who we carry with us in this room today. I started writing. I'll just answer that question. Like, we're using use the word creative, and we do use the word creative, but I think for me, it was like something quite, the shock was something that my body processed through writing, and that happened immediately. Like, I was a writer too. I've written all my life, like made up stories and all of that. Like, I wish I was a singer. I wish I was an artist. I had so many other things. I'm like, why writing? But anyway, that's the gift that I got. And I say that as in, I love to write. The gift that I got was love of writing and story. And so I arrived home on this first night, and those who've experienced that first night, that parallel universe, will know, like, it's like you're not really in the world, you're in a different place. And my only way to process what I was feeling was through writing it down. And I literally remember waking up, because, it's weird how the body continues to do what the body needs to do. How could I be going to sleep? And I woke up and there were people all around us on the floor sleeping, trying to sleep. And I was looking for a pen. And I didn't know that I was looking for a pen. And my friend beside me gave me a pen. And I never said that I needed a pen. She just knew what I was looking for. And I had to write. And I was writing in the dark. And so, was it a creative response, or was it just that the body knows how, like, for some people it would be singing, some people it would be dancing. The body just has to process this information that is not processable. And I noticed very quickly that could not be published. You couldn't publish this. It felt to me at one point in my writing that was eventually published, was that my words were far too sharp. Like, it was, well, no, how did I describe it? Anyway, it was like not possible to share it without potentially causing more harm in some ways. It's too hard for people to process that, to receive that. And so I ended up going to art classes quite soon after we lost my brother Darren. And from there, I went into art classes, and I still do art to this day, like 5-6 years on. I'm obsessed with art. And what compelled me in that direction was because there's no words, and you have to try and find a way to express yourself without in another way. And so I think as I've got on my work and my stories around, especially around suicide, support for the suicide bereaved, I've been able to wield that a little bit more, with a little bit more care for myself and for others. But it's big and it's hard, because there are things that you need to say for your own truth, but there's also taking care of the living. And so I don't find writing very easy about it. I don't find writing about it very easy. I find journaling very easy, but publishing my writing very hard. So that's why I do other types of creative outputs to still process what I need to process. My art is very bad, unfortunately. That's if we're being objective.
It was different for me, Nadine. I appreciate you sharing that. Like, for me, I thought, I can't censor this because of the silencing that I experienced as Ruth's mum during a pandemic where I was prevented from seeing my child for a very long time. I couldn't even get a flight, So for me, I had to voice this stuff because I knew I wasn't the only parent or person to be going through this stuff. And I think I wrestled with that, making it palatable for people. And maybe that's why my memoir took so long to get out. I mean, we did do a lot of editing. There were far too many fucks, amongst other things. Anyway, But I wanted to portray the rawness of it because it is raw. And that's often what's not seen. That's often what's not visible. I got tired of people looking at my face and going, "Oh, you're looking really good," and inside I was like, "Rah, no." So I guess for me it was different. My challenge was actually I'm not going to wrap this up in a way that's palatable for people because for me it wasn't palatable, and many of the other suicide bereaved mums I've met through doing this work have said thank you for thank you for not shying away from the horror of it. Not that I've put details that are horrific, but my emotions were horrific, and I guess I wanted to show that to normalize, maybe similar to what you do, Hendrix, with your photography, is to kind of normalize something that's quite horrific in another way. And I'm not sure if I've articulated that very well, but I just wanted to riff off your kōrero, Nadine. Yeah, I had to write. I couldn't do anything but write. That was it. I just wrote. Yeah, I couldn't do any art except the
Well,
garden. Except the
yeah,
garden.
I think your book and your work, and my mum, and maybe it is a difference too of the relationship, but my mum's need to voice and give voice and also to talk about to others the truth of what she was going through, and also to read the experiences in particular of other mothers was visceral, and it scared me. So it's just a case of like what people can cope, I guess, but
Totally.
my mum was deep in it and still is deep in it, to be
Yep.
honest.
Yep. I
If
don't think
talk
it
to her
goes
about
away.
it, yeah. And so, yeah, just the different experience.
And we all have a different relationship with the person who's passed, don't we? Every relationship is unique to us and them. And my experience, you know, of Rue's death was very different to my mum's experience. And he's her only moko on this side of the whānau. He was it. So she's had a very different experience to me. And you're right, it is different for everybody. Even other mothers I've spoken to, there are similarities, but there are a lot of differences too.
My mum definitely wanted to talk about it. And I find that I can't talk about it. So I would be the one doing the silencing, you know,
Mm.
because she would throw me back into a trauma state because
Ah.
I was the one who found him. And
Mm.
so, that,
Mm.
yeah, different experiences and
Mm.
just acknowledge that.
Yeah, kia ora.
And I think 3 people in the panel already between you will be able to speak to some of those layered differences, but also not all of the possibilities for how people might walk this journey. But thank you for already bringing up this interesting challenge of speaking to something, but not always through words, or speaking to something that might feel like words are partial or difficult to find that fully represent the depth and the horror and the rawness, and bringing up art. And Hendrix, I wonder if you would be able to speak a little bit to how or why you came to bring this topic into your work, but also why photography? What is it in that visual medium? What does it offer you to respond?
Yeah, well, it was that like you're saying, Nadine, that like not being able to speak about it. And um when I was at uni, my friend from back home, uh well, he took his life, and that was the first I'd known about people, but that was the first time it was like, within our circle, I guess. And I was trying to talk to one of my friends about it, and we didn't know how to, like, we didn't have the dialogue or the tools, I guess. And I'm a photographer, and my one of my tutors when we first started uni was saying, like, make work about the things that you think are important. And yeah, I don't understand why we couldn't talk about this thing. And me and my friend who I was talking to, we'd shared so much before, and I was like, why is this so different? Why is this so much harder to talk about? And that was kind of the where it came from, I guess. Yeah.
And it's so significant, I think, that we're already acknowledging here the role of silence and silencing the things that can't be said because they're too big, but also things that there are external factors that make it harder to speak to them or say them. And there are many different layers of this. We often talk in Aotearoa about stigma around this topic as kind of more of a social force, but there are also other layers with this that not everyone may be aware of. And one of those is the Coroners Act in New Zealand, which is a legal framework that does have specific legal rules about what can be said when someone dies by suicide about that death. And so it can apply to people writing news stories and how those deaths are reported, but it also can apply to writers and artists who are also bringing those stories or those losses, those people in their life and death, sometimes into a kind of a public conversation, and can also be shaped by the Coroners Act. So I'd love to hear if that has been, if and how that or other forces of silencing have been relevant to your process of speaking about this.
I just want to follow on from what you said, Hendrix, that I think a lot of people don't know what to say. So they do go silent, it's such a big thing, it's such a violent thing, it's such a traumatic thing that I don't think we're particularly well socialized to deal with grief, full stop, regardless of what you've come from or where you've come from or whatever work you've done. I think there's an overarching kind of silencing that comes around with it, but also that time thing, it feels very time limited, like you get your 3 days off work and that's it, and it's not how it is. And for me, it was another silencing was the Coroner's Act, and having to wait 4 years for a coroner's report and being told very clearly that what I could and couldn't say in my Counter of Moons memoir that came out last year, the waiting that prolongs things and the extra layer of trauma and damage that does for the bereaved is huge. And I didn't even know that I'd broken the law by saying publicly that my son had taken his life. There was an intention behind that because he had a very public persona as a musician. I didn't want any, backyard kind of whispering going on, because people do that. We all tell stories, don't we? That's how we survive, I think. But I wanted it to be clear because he wasn't the first, he won't be the last. And I guess I refused to shy away from it regardless. But being censored through the Coronial Act was a really hard pill to swallow for me as a mother, writing about it. And it's something people don't know, isn't it? We talked about that earlier. People don't know this stuff.
I certainly published, I think probably maybe it had been a month since my brother had passed away, and I wrote an essay, a braided essay about the shock, I suppose, and also the reflections that one does, which are really questions centered on a pursuit of why. It's the question that you live with. I don't think it ever goes away, and you're always turning things over. So I never say that he died by suicide, but because it's through inference and things. And then and I published it because I had a column in the spin-off, so it wasn't like I tried to get it published somewhere. It's that I had a column that I had to file, and it was the only thing that was happening in my life. Also, just like an acknowledgement to 3 days of bereavement leave for those who are closest to the person who has passed away. There is no provision for anyone outside of that circle, closer friends, cousins. There's no support for the discoverer and for the friends of the one who are supporting the discoverer. So much wrong. It's very easy for me to get political and angry about that because the support for the bereaved is not only non-existent, it actually feels like a punishment. You go back. So I was writing and publishing that my brother had died by suicide only through inference. And that was not a silencing or anything that I put on myself, rather this instinct, as I was saying before, this instinct, and I'll use the word that you used, Iona, violence. There is great violence that happens. And the type of person that I am, it wasn't a silencing, it was about like keep people safe. You're aware of this. I was aware of this. If you are a spiritual person or a person who's like kind of like feels stuff, an empath, you're like, you've got this instinct in you. And what I found, this curious thing, which when I'm not in a trauma triggered space, I can think about I want to analyze, and I would love, and this opportunity that we have today is an opportunity to look at these things. But there is a motivation behind the coroner, it seems to me. One of the motivations around the Coroner's Act is to keep, the history of this, it's written about, just the understanding of the risks that exist for when information is made public, the cause of the death, the manner and the circumstances, and the way in which a person has died, and including the location, and that information is intended to be kept protected as a way, or like suppressed and censored as a way to keep the living safe. However, the way that people talk in casual language, or little old writer over here makes an inference to it unknowingly, there's no protection. There's no protection, no care, no concern at all. If you jump on a Facebook group, for the suicide bereaved, you will read, and I urge caution because it can be really confronting. People in common language will talk about the circumstances of death and the manner of death because it's actually quite common in our language. I find it extremely offensive. But I would have to admit, I don't think I noticed it before I'd experienced bereavement by suicide. So people will say things, and I'm not going to mention them, but you know what they are. And so to me, it's like the Coroner's Act is not performing its task at all. No. It's not doing its job. It's not successful in what its intent is for. In fact, what it ends up doing is punishing the bereaved. But the interesting thing for me is that in tikanga Māori, we also have very, very clear guidelines and like protections with karakia, for example, but also things that only a tohunga should lead. So conversation. So this is why we have opening and closing of spaces where we have the moment to mihi to autaparet, and then we come back again and we break with tapu noa. All of those things are to keep the living safe. And those to me seem very activated. You also, in our Te Ao Māori view, wouldn't talk about those circumstances of death, etc., in common place like that, around the place. You also wouldn't do that. So there's to me, it seems like there's a real opportunity for our worldviews to come together and go, how are we going to do this so that people are not silenced, so that they don't hold the trauma inside their bodies and then become a risk to themselves and to their wider whānau, but we allow people to keep safe. To me, it's getting it wrong on all over the shop, all over the shop. So that's what I'd say about the coroner's stuff. Yeah, I could say so much more about it, but I do know that also that silencing and that fight against the state can then interrupt our ability to heal ourselves through the creative calling, the calling in us to be to process our grief in a way that can heal us and to heal the generations coming forth. And just to acknowledge, Iona, your whānau, you know, this is intergenerational. This trauma and mamai is carrying down generations. So what you're involved in is the science of unlocking that and healing our moko's coming. So we need more than just a legislative act is not going to provide us with that, but the creative arts have a hope, I think.
And there's so many impulses there around what creative work could do for people when they are facing some of the hardest and worst things, the possibilities in there, and that idea of care. And so I just wanted to follow up on what you were saying about the ways that these things can be spoken, but spoken safely, not restricted, but through things like tikanga, provided a safe kind of bounds. And I just was suddenly intrigued to think about what that looks like for writing, because if you publish something online and you don't know when or where someone's reading it or picking up the book, and I guess there's different opportunities and different forms to kind of open and close that piece for people. But I wondered, I would love to hear from anyone who wants to respond to that. But I thought maybe I'd just ask Hendrix about the context of his work first, because Hendrix, I know that is something you've thought about in presenting the photography that you do. And Nadine, you were talking about place as part of that. And Hendrix, I know your photography deals with places in which people have taken their lives, but also I guess people are entering a place when they come to look at your photos. So did you want to speak to how you've chosen when you've exhibited the work to open or close that, or to show care for those who are viewing your work?
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely something I think about a lot with it. Like with the exhibition, at first I was Auntie wrote a karakia for me, and she's like, you open the space with this and close it with this when it's finished. And then when it kind of grew last year and we took it home, we're in this home, and it was around Matariki. Huhana was my one of my advisors, was like, this needs to go further, you know, this and it's that same thing. It's about protecting the people who are coming in there. And yeah, like I think those, like, opening and closing the space is a good thing. And being at the exhibition in Levin, it was an opportunity to be there and try and, I guess, support people while they're visiting. Like, not everyone wants to speak to you, but then I was surprised that when people want to talk to you, you know, they really want to. And like little things, I guess, like, you know, having somewhere outside for them to have like a tea and a biscuit and share their thoughts. And I don't know, I was just sorry, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Oh,
But
absolutely, thank you.
feels like we've all spoken to space, really. And, I love that idea of, well, not the idea, actually, the action of making the space, Hendrix, for people to kōrero. And I'm remembering the last Camp Aloham in Wainuiomata, and I went along as Rue's mum, and I performed with one of his friends, some spoken word and some music and stuff. And I made myself available afterwards because that was a festival Rue played many, 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 many times. And people, just having that space for people to come up and have a kōrero, or to have a cry, or to have a cup of tea, or jump in the river, whatever, it was, I think it's really important to make space, and there's no one size fits all. And I think that's the problem with things like coroner's acts. That's the things we're saying, all Māori do it this way, and all, I don't know, whatever, all this division. It's like people are affected, full stop. And I feel my mission really has been about making space for others as well as my own, because we all feel, we're human beings, we all feel. And that thing about needing a village to raise a child. I mean, I've written about this in A Counter of Moons. We need that village when somebody has passed as well, particularly when it's been violent. We need people to come around and not be afraid, and spaces to do that are important. It could be as simple as just sitting in the garden with someone. It doesn't have to be a formal thing all the time, because it's not going to work for people in terms of vulnerability and being visible in vulnerability. That's something I've had to be totally okay with. It's like, if you see me crying, you see me crying. I'm not going to squash that down because I'm discounting myself. And I don't want to discount anyone else in their grief process either. So I think it really is, for people watching this who maybe haven't experienced suicide bereavement, that my Wardell, my challenge is to find some ways to be alongside people that works for them, without projecting or overlaying what you feel is best for them. Ask. If they don't know, just be prepared to wait, or make another cup of tea, or, I don't know, hang out there washing, take the dog for a walk. Yeah.
I think that that vulnerability you're talking about is also where a lot of sensitivity can come from, and that's like that's an important thing. One of my friends who shared a story of losing her moko, she was talking to me for this project. She said you have to be vulnerable to deal with vulnerable things, and I thought that was, that's just one of those things that resonates in my head here.
Yeah, I tautoko that everybody's experience is different and everybody's needs are different. We had a safe word when in the days and weeks after Darren passed away, because it became apparent very quickly that it was also during COVID, and we couldn't go anywhere, and we were all in the house together, and we were 3 generations who had previously been estranged. So Darren's death also pushed us, as death does, like I've described it like an explosion, and I actually find it quite miraculous. Like it's kind of, it would be miraculous to me that a whānau would hold together or even be stronger after bereavement by suicide, when you understand what people go through, the intensity of what has happened and what is learned and what can be held, and what feels to some as though something that they could never forgive, blah, blah, blah. Like, so much stuff that you cannot talk about publicly because it isn't yours alone. Another form of silencing. But we used to have a safe word so that we agreed, just like a safe word, oh, we can't talk about that. We need to stop because this person is triggered, so-and-so's triggered. And oh my God, people, there was nothing we could talk about, nothing. There's almost nothing we could talk about because everyone was triggered by something, seemingly sometimes something that had no relationship to Darren's death at all. Someone would talk about a song and it's like cloud was the safe word. This is all that we heard. And so I have deep respect too for the ways in which other people need to cope differently, need different things to cope. And I will admit actually that because I'm a journaler, unfortunately, and recently I've been through my journals in the weeks and months and years, and I realized how much I got wrong. I got a lot wrong in terms of, believing that someone this is what you need. So I just acknowledge what you said, Iona, to get beside people and listen to them and what they need. I wanted everyone to do art, forcing art on everybody. Then I took everybody to rock and roll dancing, like I was fucking lost it, like crazy. I was afraid of other people's grief. I think that's the true thing that I could say. Yeah. I wanted people to grieve like I did. But I'm interested, Iona, like you did, and you've talked about making space for others. And I think that, can you just remind me and us what you did in those months afterwards, this book that you put together? I received the call myself, but I didn't submit to it. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because I think it's such a generous thing to make space for others.
Kia ora. Well, I'd written A Counter of Moons, the last book to be published first, along with my poetry collection, In the Shape of His Hand Lay a River. And one morning, Roo came and sat on the bed and he goes, "Mum, you need to make space for other people's grief too." So out of that, I thought, okay, I can do that. Sure. What was they thinking? No, it was a good thing, but it was a big thing to take on. So I started a little press called Elixir and Star. Elixir being one of Reuben's totems albums and Star being his first word. It just felt important that this was based around in memory of Rue. So I opened up for multimedia submissions from New Zealanders, and I got hundreds of submissions. And here I am, in grief. Oh, yeah, I can do that. Far out. Anyway, so I did it and I pulled the book together. And in a previous life, I worked in the printing industry. So I had enough skills to do all the typesetting and layout and editing and everything else to pull this book together. And one of Rue's friends did the cover art, and a whole lot of musicians that knew Reuben pulled together a playlist as well. So it has a music playlist and it has visual art, and it has poetry, it has short little essays, and it's gone all over the world, which is fantastic. When I say gone all over the world, I've donated it to many places, including the libraries here in Aotearoa. Like I've had to give my books to New Zealand libraries, which feels really bizarre because this was the first of its kind. There was nothing else like it in Aotearoa that was multimedia. It was all about grief. There were no kind of limits on, there were limits on language, of course, but it was, I think the youngest person was 13 and the eldest was in their 80s, and it was just a beautiful thing to be able to make space for unique, individual, personal expressions of grief, to also illustrate that it's not the same for everybody, and to normalize it. So that was called A Liminal Gathering, and that came out at the end of 2023. And I'm opening Elixir and Star again for submissions for A Liminal Gathering 2, this year because people keep saying to me, "Oh my God, that book was so great. It helped me. It's helped my friend. I've passed it on. Can I get another copy?" And for me, that's about community. That's about building a community of people who are happy to come together and express this stuff in their own ways without restrictions.
Amazing, Iona. Did you have support to do that? I also have a little bit of well, I know I've dabbled. I'm a zine maker, and I've printed books by hand, and I had done this little chapbook, like, so my one tiny little essay, and so I don't know if people understand like what a massive undertaking that is. Like, did you have help, or did you all the editing you did
Did it
yourself?
all myself. Did the
It's
whole thing myself. Yeah, it was crazy. It really was. Like afterwards, I
I
was like,
know. I'm like, oh my gosh, and
uh,
you're doing it again as well.
but
You're
I'm
about
getting
to do
help
it.
this time.
I was
I'm
gonna say
getting help.
I would
Absolutely.
I offer my help.
Thank you.
Too. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's why
There's
I'm
no
still here.
resources. There's
No,
no
there's not.
resources.
That's nothing. There was nothing when
Nothing.
Rue died. It was like, where's all the New Zealand stuff? There was very little. And
And
yeah.
we said before we wouldn't talk too much about politics and stuff, but let us just say that there is anti-support. There's nothing. And when people say there's campaigns all the time about, if you need help, reach out, and there's a helpline and blah, blah, blah. Honestly, it almost feels like that it's gaslighting now,
Yep.
because
Yep.
actually when you're in the midst of grief and you look for help, there's especially when, like, there might be talk therapies. I don't mean to say that put talk therapies down, but we often need more support than just going to sit in an office with someone and talk about your grief. We want to hear from each other. We literally want to be around other people who've been through it and know where you are at. And that's why those Facebook support groups can be quite helpful, but I've also found them to be risky because of their lack of moderation. So that book, in fact, that it's a passive book that people can engage with and then step in, come to, and then step and then put it down. It seems absolutely freaking wild to me that this isn't a kaupapa that you are resourced to do for your actual job. Like, why should the bereaved have to do it from the negative reserves, that comes from our own and an expense of our own mental and spiritual and emotional well-being? So that is my little political rant. Just get it in there.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Change.
I
Start
think
with supporting the bereaved, and we will start to meaningfully address our suicide rate. I believe it.
Thank you so much, all of you. I think it's so clear how much is wanted and needed in this space, and that our kōrero now is just, a drop in the bucket, a scratch on the surface of the depth of experience and how raw and big that is, but also the depth of response that is needed to hold people, to care for people, to address systems that both lead to these terrible losses, but also lead to these layers of trauma that continue for those who are left. And I was reflecting on that with placing this topic under the topic of the journal issue of endings, which in some ways is very obvious, but then in other ways, it's not an ending, suicide. It's not, that person remains in so many ways, but also we remain and the work remains, and it can be the beginning, as it has been for each of you, of different creative works that are just so meaningful. I'm grateful for you to speak to us about those here, and also again the work that people can find through your bios. Obviously the ending and the beginnings are together, and I know in Te Ao Māori as well, the sense of time as linear is also much more nuanced than that, and so walking backwards into a future you didn't expect without your loved ones, but that way to continue to be in relation. I don't know, there's so much there. I'm really grateful to each of you for bringing bringing a piece of that. Is there anything that you haven't, I mean, there'll be many things, but that you particularly want to place in our kōrero now that you haven't yet been able to speak to do today?
I think it was a beautiful kōrero. Thank you. Thank you for that opportunity. And I hope there's been some helpful things and inspiration and learning for those listening as well. So thank you, Susan, for opening the space, and Iona and Hendrix and your mahi, which is ongoing. Yeah.
No, thank you, each of you. Yeah.
I guess there's one thing I'd like to add, other than massive thanks for this space, is to not be afraid to talk about it. You know,
Yeah.
just don't be afraid to talk about it. We need to talk about it. Some of us more than others, you know. It's important.
Okay, thank you, each of you. Thank you to all who've joined us in this space, and we're hopeful that that this is the beginning, or I mean a continuation of the work each of you has already been doing, but again another beginning, as well as the topic of endings of conversations we might have together to care for and hold each other, and to use creative arts, creative writing, and more spaces in Aotearoa to work with and around the things that are difficult to speak to because of social and legal and other sensitive things. So yeah, thank you for speaking to it with me today, and I'll turn to Nadine to close us with a karakia. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Well, I was actually going to close with a karakia tuia, the karakia that of binding us all together, but actually because we talked about endings, I thought I'd close with ko te pū, which is a karakia that you normally read, or that you would normally say at the beginning of a kaupapa, but just acknowledging what you have said about endings and beginnings. And Moana Jackson, of course, would and it's well known that, you know, all endings are just beginnings, and that is the meaning of whakapapa. When something comes to an end, something else comes forth. And so on that note, just acknowledge, all our loved ones, and I also mihi too to Ruben coming to you, to sitting at the end of the bed and saying, "Mum, come on," because that is that is essentially what you were saying, Susan. You know, one beginning, one ending leads to another beginning. So tui tira māku I tēnei karakia e tuku ko te pū, te more, te weu, te aka, te rea, ko te waunui, te kune, te whē, te kore, te pō, ko tēnei te timatanga o te ao, ko tēnei te timatanga o te ao. Haumie, huie, tai.
Ai, kia
Kia ora, ngā mihi.
ora.